Brian Shaffer did not disappear from a lonely highway or a forest road. He vanished after a normal night out in a busy college bar district, surrounded by friends, strangers, cameras, and closing time noise. That is what makes the case feel so impossible. In places like this, everyone assumes someone else saw the important moment, or that the camera must have caught it. Brian Randall Shaffer was 27 years old and studying medicine at Ohio State University. He had friends, family, a girlfriend, academic pressure, and a future that still seemed to be moving forward. On March 31, 2006, near the beginning of spring break, Brian went out with friends in Columbus. The night eventually brought them to the Ugly Tuna Saloona, a campus area bar where losing sight of someone for a few minutes would not seem unusual. But Brian was not missing for a few minutes. According to the FBI, his last known contact was around 1:55 a.m. on April 1, 2006, while he was having drinks with friends at a local Ohio State University bar. Public case summaries describe him near the second-floor entrance shortly before 2 a.m., speaking with two women before moving out of frame. In another story, that would be a forgettable moment from a night out. In this one, it became one of the last confirmed pieces of his timeline. After that, the story should have been simple. Brian should have walked out, met his friends, gone home, called his girlfriend, or appeared the next day with a boring explanation. Instead, when the bar closed, his friends could not find him. At first, that may not have felt like an emergency, because nights out are full of small misunderstandings. People split up in crowds. Phones go unanswered, someone leaves early, and everyone assumes someone else already knows where the missing friend went. But the ordinary explanations began to collapse when Brian did not return to his normal life. He did not contact his family, did not contact his girlfriend, and did not continue with the plans people expected him to keep. What began as a gap after closing time slowly became something much darker. A young man had entered a crowded bar district, and the next confirmed chapter of his life never appeared. The surveillance question became the detail that made the case famous. Brian was seen near the bar around closing time, but he was never clearly confirmed leaving through the monitored exit. That sentence sounds like a locked room mystery, but real surveillance footage is not perfect. Cameras miss angles, crowds block views, lighting fails, and buildings have blind spots. Still, even if the camera problem has a practical explanation, the disappearance does not. If Brian left through another route, then the real mystery begins outside the frame. Maybe he used an exit that was poorly monitored. Maybe he passed behind a group of people, or appeared on footage too blurry for anyone to identify with confidence. That theory removes the impossible feeling from the bar itself. But it immediately creates a new question. Once Brian reached the street, where did he go? Closing time changes the city. The crowd thins, music fades, rides arrive, strangers mix with students, and someone who is safe inside a group can suddenly be alone. If Brian left the bar alive, he may have walked into that unstable window between night and morning. It is a time when normal decisions become careless, and ordinary streets can become dangerous. One theory is that he encountered foul play after leaving. A stranger, a ride, a brief conversation, or a confrontation could have taken the night in a direction no one around him recognized. This theory explains the silence afterward. But it has never been publicly anchored by a confirmed suspect, a confirmed vehicle, or physical evidence that proves what happened. Another theory is accidental death. A city has hidden places. Stairwells, rooftops, construction areas, loading docks, dumpsters, alleys, and unfinished spaces where one wrong step can change everything. This kind of theory does not require a criminal plan. It only requires alcohol, darkness, bad timing, and a hazard that was not obvious until it was too late. But that theory also has a serious weakness. Brian's case received major attention, the surrounding area was investigated, and no confirmed accident scene or remains solved the case. So the accident theory remains possible, but incomplete. It explains how a night can turn tragic, but not why no final location has ever been confirmed. A different theory asks whether Brian left voluntarily. Some people have pointed to stress, medical school pressure, grief, and the emotional weight of becoming the person everyone expected him to be. But starting over is not as simple as walking away from a bar. A new life requires money, identification, transportation, planning, silence from anyone who helps, and years without a verified mistake. Brian had a family, a girlfriend, a career path, and people who expected to hear from him. To believe he chose to vanish, you have to believe he cut every one of those ties completely. That is not impossible, but it is a heavy claim. Without confirmed evidence that Brian lived afterward under another identity, voluntary disappearance remains speculation. The strangest thing about the case is that it feels both crowded and empty at the same time. There were witnesses, cameras, friends, investigators, and years of public attention. Yet the most important movement is still missing. Many missing person cases begin with almost no starting point. Brian's case has the opposite problem. The starting point is so specific that the missing ending feels even more disturbing. He was not lost somewhere vague. He was last known near a campus area bar at a known time, after a normal night with friends. That is why the case feels like a missing frame in a film. One moment, Brian is part of the night. The next, the footage and the timeline no longer hold him. For Brian's family, this has never been just a strange internet mystery. It is the absence of a son, a brother, and a person whose future was interrupted without explanation. The public often focuses on the camera problem because it is visual and easy to repeat. His loved ones have had to live with the human problem. Brian never came home. In 2021, the Ohio Attorney General's office released an age-progressed image of Brian and stated that he had been 27 when he went missing. That kind of image is painful because it forces time back into a case that is frozen at closing time. Age progression asks people to imagine not only where a missing person went, but who they might have become. It reminds everyone that the person in the last known images is frozen, while the rest of the world keeps aging. The most responsible way to tell this story is to separate the known facts from the theories. The FBI lists Brian as missing from Columbus, Ohio, with his last known contact around 1:55 a.m. while drinking with friends at a local OSU area bar. Everything after that becomes a field of possibilities. He may have left through a route the cameras failed to capture, suffered an accident nearby, encountered foul play, or chosen to disappear. Each theory explains part of the case. None explains all of it. The camera may only show where the known timeline ends, not where the real danger began. Somewhere beyond that frame, Brian either walked into danger, walked into an accident, or walked into a life no one has ever confirmed. That missing frame is why the case still unsettles people. Brian was there, then the camera lost him. His friends lost him, the city lost him, and the next confirmed chapter never came. So the question remains almost painfully simple. How does a 27-year-old medical student step out of a crowded night near a university bar and disappear so completely that no one can prove where he went next?